6:30 p.m. Commission meeting will be held virtually using Zoom and in person while following social distancing guidelines. As chair, I'll be leading the Planning Commission meeting, and the public invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person or join via online Zoom. If attendees experience audio problems, we suggest you leave the meeting and then rejoin. This has usually fixed the problem in the past. Additional instructions on how to participate are online at www.burnsvillemn.gov in the public meeting calendar. As usual, tonight's meeting is available for viewing on BCTV and on the city's website. If you are unable to participate this evening and would like to submit public testimony, I encourage you to email your comments to city staff or mail your comments directly to City Hall. You may participate in tonight's meeting online by going to zoom.us/join and typing in meeting ID 955-1953-9288. Once you're logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you wish to speak to. You also may call into the meeting at 651-372-8299. Again, the meeting ID is 955-1953-9288. For each public hearing, again, I will open up a time when the callers may speak to that item, and we'll give more instructions at that time. Your call will be muted until that time. Please note there might be a slight delay due to the difference in technology. If speaking by phone, please mute your computer since there may be a delay and an echo. With that, let's move on to the agenda. We all should have received a packet in our emails, and within there is an agenda. Do I have a motion to accept, or let me ask, is there any changes to the agenda, staff?
No changes from staff?
Members? Okay, do I get a motion to accept the agenda? Commissioner Watt?
I move that we accept the agenda, that we adopt the agenda.
Commissioner Watt moves to adopt the agenda. Do I have a second? Commissioner Anderson?
I second.
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Watt, seconded by Commissioner Anderson. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Good. Moving on. In your packet, you also should have received last meeting's minutes. Any changes to the minutes, Commission? Seeing none. Any changes to the meeting staff?
No changes.
No changes. With that, I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Braddock.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Commissioner Braddock. Do I have a second? Commissioner Timmerman.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Timmerman. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Didn't think so. Let's move on to the agenda. Our first item tonight is a presentation on equity, inclusion, and city zoning codes. I'm going to hand it over to our Assistant Community Development Director, Regina Dean. Regina.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. Tonight we have Jared Shepard from our City Attorney's Office that will be giving a presentation on equity inclusion as it relates to zoning codes. This is a kind of an introduction and an opportunity for you to ask questions and to add to any discussion, and really an opportunity for you to think about these themes as you're reviewing the zoning code and providing suggestions and comments as we go through this about year and a half long process. You have received the first round of city zoning code chapter or title 10 work, our single family R1 and our single family agriculture zoning districts R1A to react to. At your next planning commission meeting, you'll have discussion on those items and lead into other topics, but we thought this would be a great introduction for you. And again, another lens to look at as you're reviewing and providing input on these really important changes. So with that, I will turn it over to Jared. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions as we go through this as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Regina. Thank you, members of the commission, for having me here tonight. As Regina mentioned, we are going to talk just a little bit about equity, inclusion, and city codes, just to sort of give a base of some history for the commission to think about as you're going through this year-long process of looking at Titles 10 and 11, and some equity and inclusion kind of topics and things to think about as you do that work. So, kind of a brief presentation tonight. We're going to start with historical discrimination and inequities in municipal development. We're going to talk about a few things that happened historically with cities. And we're going to talk a little bit about Burnsville, who lives here. What do we mean by equity? And then our task for equity and inclusion in city codes, the task you have before you, as well as resources for further education and reading. In the zoning context, we want to start with racially exclusionary zoning. Prior to 1917, city zoning ordinances across the country were allowed to legally forbid people of color from occupying blocks where the majority of residents were white. So that was a common process. I'm going to skip forward real quick here. This is a zoning map from Atlanta. And if you can see here, it's kind of a small map, but in the bottom left-hand corner, you have districts literally zoned based on the color of people's skins, based on whether you're a member of the BIPOC community or you're a white individual. So in 1917, the Supreme Court took up that issue, whether or not cities could racially zone. And in Buchanan v. Worley, they determined that racial zoning was unconstitutional. In that case, Buchanan was a white individual who sold a house to Worley, a black individual in Louisville, Kentucky. And Louisville had an ordinance that prohibited black people from living on a block where the majority of the residents were white. Since 8 out of the 10 houses were occupied by white residents, Worley was not allowed to live on that block. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and interestingly enough, the court recognized Louisville's interest in exercising its police power and the promotion of public health, safety, and welfare. And, you know, that's kind of the touchstone for zoning and for municipal regulation in general. But the court went on to determine that the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th Amendment assured to people of color the enjoyment of all civil rights enjoyed by white persons, and found that the law racially zoning was therefore unconstitutional. But what happened after that was simply a reaction to how can private individuals and municipalities work around this unconstitutional ruling. And that's where we start to see the prevalence of discriminatory covenants. And you might have heard a lot about that lately. There has been a lot of discussion here locally due to the work of Mapping Prejudice at the University of Minnesota and the Just Deeds Project, which is a project of which the Minnesota Association of City Attorneys is involved in. And there's been several news articles about covenants here lately. So racially restrictive covenants refer to contractual agreements that prohibit the purchase, lease, or occupation of a piece of property by a particular group of people. This is one example here in front of you, and I apologize, you know, some of the language here is offensive. No persons of any race other than the Caucasian race shall occupy any building or any lot, except that domestic servants were allowed to live in residence, but they weren't allowed to own. And this is kind of a common discriminatory covenant that you'll see, but many of them have even more offensive language. One of the things that Mapping Prejudice has discovered, so they have mapped, that project has mapped all of Hennepin County. And in doing so, they found that 100% of the discriminatory covenants are targeted against black Minnesotans, while the covenants also target other populations, ethnicities, religions, et cetera, using some very outdated and disgusting language. So again, these evolved kind of in response to the Supreme Court's ruling. How can, at a local level, we determine where people live? This was encouraged by the kind of...
Hey, Jacob, if I could just, could you comment on the difference between ordinances and covenants? Covenants being private, that cities don't get involved with?
Well, yes, so...
Thank you.
discriminatory covenants are a private contract, but to say that cities didn't get involved in it would also be inaccurate. Some of these covenants that you'll find on properties were on the plats that were approved by local government. And at this time, you know, there's a variety of different actors that are working kind of together, whether explicitly or implicitly. You have developers who are marketing subdivisions that have these covenants on those to residents. Come here, live here in this covenant area, this all-white area. You have the federal government's practice of redlining in the underwriting of federal home loans. So as sort of this is the time of building the middle class, right? And the time of growth of the suburbs and people, you know, many people were getting federal loans. And the redlining process was to say that this area is not good. And the good area had covenants on them. That was required. So the federal government was intimately involved. But it is important to know that local government was also involved in this
Yes,
as
I just
well.
wanted to note, because we often talk about covenants and have property owners come in and whatnot, and we always advise the commission and council that the city does not enforce those private covenants. So that's what I
Sure.
was referring to. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it is important to reiterate, these are ultimately a private contract recorded against the property, but again, in some instances, Richfield, for example, where I live, we found one that is right on the face of the plat, so it's recorded against all the properties through the platting process. By 1955, Hennepin County had 22,000 covenants. And I am gonna switch here, go to the internet if I can. Just to show you, for those of you who have not seen, this is the map. This is from Mapping Prejudice. You can access it at mappingprejudice.umn.edu. It's also on the justdeeds.org website as well. So this map starts in 1910, and it's a time lapse of showing the use of covenants throughout Hennepin County. So if you see, every time I look at this map, I feel like I get a new takeaway, but if you see, you look at Minneapolis and all of the first ring suburbs, there's a border, a wall that's created by these covenants. And another thing that you'll see is that in South Minneapolis, if you think about Minneapolis, you think about the lakes and the desirable places to live and the places that have higher home values. Those are rife with these covenants as well. Most of those properties have covenants. And then when you think about that property, you also think about, well, why is it desirable? It's got green space, it's got lakes, all these paths. And one of the things that I've discovered as I've educated myself about some of the effects of these covenants, if you look north into sort of the middle of Minneapolis around Lake Street, you don't see the covenants, but if you think about the property there, we have property that there's less green space, and on average, that area of town is 5 degrees hotter than the areas in South Minneapolis that have covenants. If you just think about how hot it is today, add an extra 5 degrees, that has a considerable impact on your life and I just want you to think about that. And again, just kind of going back to that final look at the map all through Hennepin County, almost in every, not all, but almost in every suburban Hennepin County city, you see these covenants. And if you look at the map here, it ends at 1955. So let me back out of here, go back to the slideshow. So these covenants were rendered unenforceable by a court case called Shelley v. Kramer in 1948. So the Supreme Court said you couldn't enforce these contracts, these covenants. But they were still legal in other words, people could still put them on the properties. In 1953, the legislature outlawed them here in Minnesota. But it wasn't until 1968 under the Fair Housing Act that they were expressly at the federal level made illegal. But as you saw, even though in 53 they were prohibited by the state legislature, people were still putting them on properties all the way up till 1955. And again, just want you to kind of think about the growth of the suburbs and the ability to build generational wealth with ownership of a single-family home, as many of our parents and grandparents did. And again, discriminatory covenants are not the only piece of this puzzle as well. The GI Bill, allowed returning soldiers to get loans. My grandfather actually had received one of those loans, and those were largely off limits to returning black soldiers. They weren't expressly off limits, but in terms of application, in terms of how the program was run, it was largely off limits. And that allowed, obviously, returning soldiers to get an education, get a down payment on a house, and start the process of, again, building generational wealth. So that's a little bit about the history kind of going into the middle of the 20th century. And really, why that's important, because when you look at that map, you see the way that communities were set up. And then if you look at that map over the demographics today, not a lot has changed in terms of where people live and were allowed to live and where people live today. Now I want to talk about Burnsville. So we take that history into kind of our work here, who lives and works in Burnsville. So this is from the American Communities Survey from the U.S. Census Bureau. It's a 5-year estimate, so it's an estimate, it might be a little off. 18.5% of Burnsville residents speak a language other than English at home. We're a community that's 72.9% white, but we do have representation from other groups, 13.8% black or African American, 4.8% Asian, and other races as well. Another interesting statistic, 10.3% of Burnsville residents have a disability. And that's another piece to think about as we go through the work of the zoning code. So what do we mean by equity and inclusion? And these are the city of Burnsville's definition. Equity means removing barriers to create full access. And inclusion means leveraging differences to create opportunities for all. And so this is just, again, sort of a little bit of an overview of things to think about as you all bring your time, your experience. I'm sure you'll find things in the code that other people haven't thought of. But one of the things you'll find as you go through the code process is gendered language. A lot of the old codes, whether that's in the zoning code or city code as a whole, has gendered language, whether it's just mentioning a male pronoun, his, or his or her. And so that's something that can be looked at and replaced to not even have a pronoun or make it more inclusive with their. Outdated language, this is a code provision on prostitution, which kind of, the way it's read, it sort of puts the onus on, the woman. And so language like that sort of has judgment in it is something we can take a look at. In the zoning context, things to think about. In your packet today, there was an article from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune that talked about some of this history that we've talked about this evening, including moving forward the idea that we went from discriminatory covenants to single-family housing, which started to appear in zoning codes around that 1955 timeframe, if I'm correct. So obviously, many of you might be aware that Minneapolis has sort of gotten rid of single-family zoning. I'm not here to prescribe any particular policy choice, just it is certainly something to think about, single-family zoning and how the city wants to address that. Definitions of family that are in the zoning code, are they representative of, you know, a large group of people? Are they more representative of different types of families? Restrictions, density restrictions, occupancy restrictions, setbacks. One of the things as I was thinking about this and thinking about the disability context is impacts for ramps, et cetera, when it comes with setbacks from lots and whether or not you can fit a ramp. So it's something to think about. Also in just enforcement of the zoning code and how the language of the code helps you to do that in an equitable manner. Another thing to think about is the language of the code. Is English only the way to go? Is there a ways to make that code more accessible? And then I just wanted to provide the commission some more resources. In addition to the Star Tribune article that was in the packet, I just do want to point out that Dave Unmacht from the League of Minnesota Cities also wrote sort of a responsive article in the Star Tribune about some of the legislative, proposed legislative solutions raised by the article about zoning, whether there's a legislative fix and whether that's the right idea or that we need to be doing this at a local level. So it's worth, let me see if I can remember the name of that article. Counterpoint, local housing solutions are best addressed by cities. So it might be an article worth checking out. And then in front of you, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, again, mapping prejudice, just deeds, cities and counties, first steps towards solving common ADA problems, and that's put out by the federal government, League of Minnesota Cities and the American Planning Association. And then if you want to read more about some of the history that we went over today, and I know I went through it fast, The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, that book is really about the federal housing policies, the redlining, and then Race for Profit. And then if you're more of a visual learner, Jim Crow of the North is a fantastic locally produced documentary about the work of mapping prejudice, about the local history of discriminatory covenants in Hennepin County, segregated by design. And then on the slightly more humorous side, the disturbing history of the suburbs. This is a short look at it with some humor involved. But that's all I have, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. That was very sobering, looking at that map of Minneapolis and seeing the disparities and the covenants. It's really interesting stuff. Thank you for sharing that with us. Any questions, anybody on the commission? Mr. Shepherd or the city staff? I'm not seeing any. I really appreciate the presentation. A couple things that I had was you talked about limiting our setbacks. That's basically just for ramps and such. Our heart of the city process is have the setbacks up against the curb. Are those types of things something you discourage against, or are you looking for more?
So I don't have an answer for you on that. As I was kind of looking at things to think about, is one of the issues that was raised in some of the articles and literature that I read. So it's something that you can talk to the planning staff about as you go through this process, and whether or not that the setbacks you have in any particular part of the code works in a way that is inequitable or non-inclusive. But I don't have a particular solution that I would present to you right now.
Okay, well, I appreciate that.
I have a quick question.
Commissioner Timmerman.
Have you looked at code in other cities or maybe legislation in Minnesota or other states who have gone to gender neutral language, and have there been, I guess, issues with that. I had a conversation this past weekend. I mean, clearly you have to be careful not to use, you know, a plurality type of pronoun when a singular is appropriate. So I guess I'm curious, would we be one of the first cities looking at something like this? Would we be, you know, kind of jumping in where others are? I mean, I want to do it. I appreciate the intent behind it. At the same time, I just want to make sure down the road, you know, has this been tried and tested?
Sure, I don't know any sort of empirical study or anything that I can give you, but I would say that I think as general practice, as codes are amended, I know in my personal practice, when you kind of amended piecemeal, you always try to clean up some of that outdated language. And usually there's ways to say things that don't have to describe gender at all. So I don't see, you know, sitting here, I can't think of a problem that it would create. It's just kind of dependent on each section of the code and what you're trying to describe. But I do think that city staff and attorneys try to kind of clean that up generally. So you'll go through, if you took probably any city's code, you'll have some stuff where the gendered language is cleaned up and then some other sections where it's not. And that's a great thing about what we're doing here in Burnsville is we're taking this holistic look at the whole code and kind of making it all match up and make sense and work together.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for your presentation today. I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next piece of our agenda. And I believe, oh, I gotta get to the right place here. We have a public hearing, application of Minnesota Cemeteries Corporation for the Conditional Use Permit Amendment for an expansion to increase the number of cemetery plots within the western part of Pleasant View Memorial Gardens Cemetery located at 400 Highway 13 East. And I believe Sarah Madden, our city planner, will be presenting. Ms. Madden.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Planning Commission. So the item before you this evening, kind of as stated, is a conditional use permit amendment to an existing cemetery in Burnsville, just north of Highway 13. So some details on this. The site itself is zoned R1 for single-family land use, guided as low-density residential. Cemeteries are conditional uses in the R1 zoning district. So this cemetery, as far as I can tell, has existed prior to the incorporation of the city of Burnsville. There are areas of the property that are older than others. In the last 20 years or so, the pieces of the property have been sold off for redevelopment. You'll see the Woofda and there's a U-Haul storage facility, things like that that have been sold off from the property by the owner of the cemetery. So there are 2 parcels in the cemetery. There is expansion for new plots proposed on both of the parcels. There's 2 entities involved in the conditional use permit amendment because the 2 parcels do technically have 2 different listed fee owners, but they do work in coordination with one another, the properties. So this amendment is just related to an expansion of the footprint of the conditional use that you may see for other CUPs and conditional uses in the city. So shown here our aerial view and zoning map of the property. So as I mentioned, you can kind of see that there are 2 parcels involved here. Primarily the expansion areas are in the southwest corner, and then more broadly in the northwest area of the cemetery site. So in the southwest corner of the site, less work to be enacted kind of in this area. You can see on the clip of the site plan that I provided, kind of that outlined area north of Highway 13, are areas where the kind of underbrush will be cleared. There will be some tree removal, but the grades in this case, or in this location, that the applicant has indicated that the grades are already sufficient for them to be able to kind of portion off the cemetery plots, so they won't need to do any grading in this area. with the tree removal and the underbrush removal, there still is erosion control measures that'll be put into place. And they'll be maintaining a 20-foot wetland buffer that exists now. There is a wetland on site. A wetland delineation has been provided to the city, and the City Natural Resources Department did indicate that that was approved, and there are no issues with the application from that standpoint. The plots will be well outside of that buffer area that is required. For the northwest corner of the site, like I said, general expansion kind of north of the ring road, and then some grading and tree removal in the northwest corner as a whole. So about 2.6 acres, and they'll be bringing in fill as part of the grading of the site. The bulk of the tree removal for the site is on this northern portion of the property, and grading in kind of these steeper areas here to level it out more to make it adequate for the portioning off of the cemetery plots. And again, erosion control measures put in place in this location, and some seed mix that'll be planted to aid with that as well. Some staff considerations. While there are no engineering related or really planning particularly related conditions of approval, there are some permits that'll be needed by the applicant as they move forward in the process past approval by the city related to grading permits, general construction permits, and working with the Lower Minnesota River Watershed District. The item this evening is really related to the fact that a CUP and changes to it need to be authorized by an amendment and go through this planning process for the intensification of the use and the expansion of the footprint of the granted conditional use for this cemetery. Overall, staff is supportive of the application. We're recommending, the Planning Commission recommend approval with the general condition that the conditions of previously approved conditional use permits remain in full force and effect. This is a public hearing, and I can stand for questions if needed.
Thank you, Ms. Madden. Commissioner, any questions for city staff? A very quiet group tonight. Holy cow. With that, then, I guess I will open up the public hearing. It is 7:02, according to my watch, and we'll ensure that nobody is sitting online or on the phone before we or if anyone here would like to speak to this measure, please feel free to step up. I feel kind of lonely here by myself, just when we're talking. All right, and it doesn't sound like anybody is online, and there's nobody on the phone, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. We're going to round up to 7:03. Just for paperwork, whatever. Anyway, well, I am looking for discussion or a motion or something. Somebody say something. Commission. Commissioner Awad.
Thank you. This seems pretty straightforward, and thanks for an excellent presentation. I'd be happy to make a motion unless there are other comments.
Any other comments? Okay.
Okay, I will make the motion. I move that we recommend to the city council approval of the conditional use permit amendment for cemetery expansion, subject to the following one condition. Condition one is the conditions of previously approved conditional use permits shall remain in full force and effect.
Okay, a motion was made by Commissioner Awad. Do I have a second? Commissioner Anderson.
I second that.
Why, thank you, Commissioner Anderson. So a motion by Commissioner Awad, second by Commissioner Anderson. All in favor of this motion, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it sounds like we're all set with the cemetery. Yeah, thank you, Ms. Madden, for that great presentation and bringing this to our attention. Next on the agenda, we have a public hearing for, 5337 Properties LLC, a development of a stage plan unit development for expansion of the Park-Chrysler-Jeep Dealership building in site improvements, preliminary and final plat of a two-lot commercial subdivision of Industrial Park, 5337, located at 1408 Highway 13 West. I believe we're going to be hearing from our other city planner, Deb Garros. Ms. Garros, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioners. We do have representatives here for the applicant. David Dworsky is here, and Brent. Okay, thank you. Kyle Crawford. I'm sorry, it's been so long since I've seen you. Okay, I've worked with Jonathan and David for a lot of years. And they both really are great people, and this project is gonna be a really nice project, and it's been a lot of years in the making for them. In terms of the project site itself, there are 7 different parcels out there. None of them have been platted previously. So the entire site is almost 12 acres, and they are looking to plat the property, so they will be combining all of those parcels and creating 2 new commercial lots. The zoning of the site is B4, which is highway commercial and planned unit development. In 2019, they received concept planned unit development approval for the staged development of the property, and that's what is coming to fruition this evening. The site is also in the city's drinking water protection overlay district, and it is also in the North Gateway district. The comprehensive plan land use for the entire area is MRQ, or Minnesota River Quadrant. And this is an aerial photo that just shows the entire site. There is a long history of these various parcels, which is included in your report. And I won't go through those in detail. Primarily the north part of the site has been used for soils restoration in this area that has been completed over the years. And then the southern part of the property has been developed. Just wanted to call the Planning Commission's attention to 2 things. On the south here, whoops, oh, now I've done it. Okay. At this here. This is the Park Car Wash at this location, and then this is their used auto dealership building, and both of these are going to be removed or are proposed to be removed so that they can do an expansion to the existing main dealership building. There is also the administration building or administrative building here, and that's proposed to remain as is. What the proposal consists of is really a large expansion to the dealership. This is going to be able to offer their customers much more opportunity in terms of service and delivery. They will be able to also, there are new lounges for customers, a lot of areas for them to be able to work on their new vehicle inventory and get it set out for sale. So it will be a very nice addition. On the 3D view, on the bottom, I just wanted to show that we're looking at primarily what people will see from Highway 13 is the addition, which looks primarily like this area to the west, but there is actually a building addition that's going to be happening to 3 sides of the building in this. And on this 3D view, this would be kind of what the back of the building, this is the northeast corner, and a car wash is proposed to be located here. And this is a view of the building looking from the northwest corner, and in this case, the car wash is in this location here. So the site plan that is proposed is really dealing with the southerly proposed lot 1, block 1. And this site has been developed, as indicated, for any number of years with a lot of different uses and different owners. And what the applicant is proposing to do is to expand the dealership primarily. This will be the new addition. Oops. Through here. And it does also include mezzanines, 2 mezzanines that are included with the project. In addition to that, there are site improvements that are proposed. Part of the some of the issues or the deviations that we'll be going through for the planned unit development really relate to existing conditions out there. So we have some existing conditions that we're trying to memorialize, if you will, with the planned unit development and say that, you know, from this point forward, we know that these exist, they're existing conditions, and we're good to go with that, so that will not cause issues in the future for the applicant as they continue to develop their property. The main site improvements that I just wanted to talk to you is there is a new driveway access that is going to be proposed. They're going to be taking out the existing driveway accesses to those two buildings here on the southwest corner. And then they're going to be actually moving the existing access further to the west. So it's going from four driveway accesses to the site to two. This new one along the frontage road, and then the one at DuPont Avenue, this is the existing access, and that's going to remain in place. In addition to that, with the site grading, I do have the grading plan. They are looking at putting in a couple of retaining walls. Small retaining wall in this location that's about 8 feet tall. And then also on this part of the site, there's an additional really short 1.5 foot or so retaining wall. In terms of the site information, as I indicated, the existing gross acreage is almost about 12 acres. They will be dedicating right-of-way and easements in the plat. So the net acreage then will go down to about 10 acres. Proposed lot 1 is 5.4 acres, a little bit bigger than the north lot, 4.6 acres. And in terms of the green space for the project and the perimeter landscaping, those types of things, we've got for lot 1, what's proposed is impervious surface will ultimately be 60 or 67%. Overall, until lot 2 is developed, it's 32%. And then in terms of green space, there are some deviations that are requested, but again, because of the existing conditions out there and circumstances, I will explain the staff support for these. But their green space required in the B4 zone is 25%. They're actually proposing more green space on lot 1 of 31%. Kind of the kicker is the next one, and that is when you have an open sales rental lot, there's a requirement for 8% of that 25 to be internally landscaped. And in this application, they are requesting a deviation to allow 3%, and that's the standard for the B4 district. So just not looking at increasing that to 8%. Staff is, from a staff perspective, we believe this is reasonable because their overall green space far exceeds that 25%. Building perimeter landscaping, for the new addition, they're proposing it to be at 57%, which is above the 50%. There's a deviation requested for that existing administration building because it doesn't have quite 50%, but it's an existing condition, and staff is supportive of that deviation as well. In terms of parking for the site, they are well within the standards. The majority of the stalls that will be proposed on the site are going to be used for vehicle storage. They have 70 stalls that are proposed for their customers and employees, and that is consistent or meets the ordinance. So in terms of the benefits of the PUD, when we do planned unit developments for some of the newer commissioners, we try to look at what are the benefits of the project, what are the deviations of the project, and when you're looking at the ordinance, what things can we look at that we can put together and come up with a reasonable or positive project for the city. So in terms of the benefits, they are providing more overall green space, 31 versus 25%, more building perimeter landscape, and this is on the new addition, 57 versus 50%. The project will also bring the site into conformance on lot 1 with the vehicle storage on unpaved parking. The entire parking area will be paved on lot 1, and they do have an interim use permit that was approved in 2019 to allow them to use a temporary or class 5 area for parking. That, in this case, for lot 1, that will all be paved. The appearance of the site is going to be greatly improved just with the removal of the other buildings, and it's been kind of a piecemeal development over the years, and this is really going to look like it's a unified development and be much superior over kind of what's existing out there, and we think that will be a positive for the entire area. They are proposing to install bike racks on the site. That will be up by the by the administration building and close to the new dealership. And access points are going to be reduced, which will improve circulation and transportation elements. And also, it's a substantial investment in their property, and we have a local business that's able to expand and continue to be here in Burnsville. The deviations, there are many, but most, actually, a good majority of these are because of existing conditions. So in terms of items 1 through 6, these are all setbacks, and they're all related to existing conditions on the property, and staff is supportive of granting these. I can get into these in detail if commissioners have questions later. Also, one of the items is to continue to allow vehicles to be parked on an unpaved area of the lot, which would be actually on lot 2, where some of that area is, until that lot is developed. Staff is not fully supportive of this. We are supportive of allowing the use, but at the time that they're coming in and really redoing the entire parking area on lot 1, it would make sense to then make the improvement to a parking area on lot 2. So in terms of having continued vehicle storage, staff does not have objection to that. We just think it should be on the paved surface meeting the ordinance as opposed to unpaved. Another deviation requested is to approve a site plan without requiring planter islands at the end of each of the parking rows. This is something that is a standard. I don't believe that we have recommended this in the past, but because of the existing conditions and the odd conformity of the site, you just have an odd shaped parcel, and you have the building that is there that they're expanding, and it does create a lot of angles and different things in order to accommodate their parking. So staff does not have an objection to that deviation request. Talked about the deviation for the perimeter landscape. The item number 10 really is not a deviation. The site, going back to, I believe, the year 2013, where I said there was some soil restoration work and cleanup there. At that time, some of the trees were removed from the site, so they had a reforestation, a balance that they need to provide because they removed over 60% of the trees. Basically, all the trees were removed. So with that, what the applicant is asking is they don't have an issue with paying for the reforestation amount, but they would like that to be on lot 2 when that develops, and staff is supportive of that. 11 is to reduce the quantity and height of landscape plantings on lot 1, and I'll get into that when we look at the landscape plan. And then we talked about the 3% versus 8% internal landscape standard. Number 13 is to allow 2 freestanding signs on the lot. And this would be for lot 1, and this is an existing condition, and what they'd like to do is have the opportunity to refurbish, the existing signage and then have it located. They're both located along the frontage road along Highway 13, and again, staff believes this is an existing condition and we don't have an issue with that. Number 14 is a setback deviation for signage, and again, the existing signs already do not conform to our standard. They maintain in the same place, and staff does not have an objection to that. The other item related to signage is the ordinance has a requirement that was adopted a few years ago where you can have freestanding signs, but there needs to be a minimum of 300 feet between them. Again, there's the existing condition. They are already closer than 300 feet, and approximately what's proposed is to be 190 feet. Again, staff does not have an objection to that and feels that's reasonable. And the last item is the common lot line between lots 1 and 2 is proposed to be platted without having a drainage and utility easement. Usually there's a 5-foot drainage and utility easement on either side. There will be retaining walls that'll be continued to be constructed. That would be within that easement. The city engineer would prefer to approve a deviation so that they don't have to plat that and come back and vacate it, rather to support that retaining wall that we know is going in there. So in terms of the subject site, this is just a quick view. The two buildings to be removed. The preliminary plat is showing the two lots. They do show the outline of the entire new footprint of the dealership building. They will be dedicating right-of-way for 126th Street up at the top, DuPont Avenue. There is also a 15-foot wide drainage and utility easement that will be dedicated along the north part of the lot, and that will also accommodate for a future trail, and that is part of the city's plan, so that will be accommodated with this. In addition to that, there is some right-of-way that will be dedicated for Highway 13 in the south part of the site. This is one of the deviations that we talked about. This is that easement that typically would be required, but that we're proposing not to be required because of the future retaining wall. And this is part of their removals plan, and basically just shows with the kind of red X's, the removals of what's out there now, and then we'll look at the plan shortly. One of the things I just wanted to draw your attention to is that they will be removing some existing stormwater facilities. And in this part of the Minnesota River quadrant, because it's in the drinking water overlay, we do not have folks generally put in their infiltration ponds because we don't want that water seeping through into the drinking water area. And in addition to that, this area was designed, there's a larger lined pond off-site, so what will happen is the stormwater generated here will be directed then to that larger regional pond. For the grading plan, just quickly, these are the two areas where the retaining walls are proposed, up in the northwest corner, and then just a short one at this location. There is some work that's proposed off-site, generally in this location, so we have included a condition that the applicant get written permission from that property owner that they are allowed to work in that location, or they may need a temporary construction easement. This is the utility plan. Basically just shows the where the existing and new sanitary and water will come into the building, and then the new storm sewer pipes, which ultimately will lead further to the north. This is the planting plan, the landscape plan. So on this, what I wanted to draw attention for the commissioners is that you can see with this that we have all of these different areas of parking, which normally if you have a bigger lot, most of the car lots, when you look at them on County Road 42, they're usually a regular shape. And you have much better opportunity. You can put a long row of parking in. We don't have really that many planter islands. If we were to just follow the ordinance as written, you'd have planter islands all over the place, which would, we think, from a staff opinion, just does not make sense in this case. It's not needed from our perspective. However, we would like to see some additional plantings. The applicant has requested deviation to allow lesser and some smaller shrubs within the project area. And staff feels that there is rationale to support that. They don't want to, because it is a dealership, want to have a lot of plant materials blocking their dealership. That's common for dealerships in the city. And what they're requesting is really to have shorter 1 to 2 foot type plantings, shrub plantings in this area. This area of the site is really the only part in front where they can plant that is their property. Otherwise, as you get further to the east, that is within the Highway 13 MnDOT right-of-way. So there's that case. In addition to that, they're proposing landscape islands in this area. This will be a new transformer. Trees proposed there, and they're proposing landscape islands here, which will also contain trees. And what staff is recommending is that in exchange for allowing lesser planters, if you will, within the parking lot, and knowing that they are providing more overall green space, that we would recommend, and what's included in the recommendation is to add more ornamental trees. These will get, they don't have to be evergreen trees, so they should not block, and they're much smaller and can be distributed throughout the site so that they should not be blocking the vehicle inventory. This is just a quick restoration plan. Just shows the turf and seed that will be added to the site. And this area here is showing all of the areas that will receive new plantings. And then this is an area that will be sodded. So some of these areas in these locations are where we're suggesting that some of these ornamental trees can be planted. In terms of the signage, the two signs that are existing are highlighted in yellow. And basically, with the site plan, they're looking to relocate one of the signs so it's close to the main driveway access. And staff does not have an issue with that. The existing sign is located in this location, and all of the wiring, et cetera, is there. So staff is recommending approval of the deviations that they've requested so that these two signs can be closer than 300 feet and also that they can maintain the setbacks that they currently have to driveway and parking spaces. In terms of exterior materials, they are using metal exterior materials. This Alpoic, I think it is called. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Maybe Miss Madden knows.
I do not, I'm sorry.
I know we've seen it on many applications recently. It's a newer material, but it's very versatile with colors, etc. And they will be using the metal panel system primarily on the area that's the new part here, kind of on the west. And then this is also the west side using it here. There will be different colors of it. There will be bands of this bamboo type color material. It's the same, it's the same type of material, it's just different colors. And then there are two canopies, one over the service, new service area, one over the main entry. And the existing building, for the most part, is just going to continue to be as is, but it would be painted. It contains EIFS, stucco, etc. As far as the materials, this is what was included with their application. You can see in the center here, this is that bamboo color. They do also, with the bamboo, when you're looking at some of these trim materials, they've got some higher gloss panels that will be located to kind of offset that. And then in addition, the aluminum window frames and a light gray material as well for coping. So the elevation plans, as we provided in the packet. And again, similar to the main entry here, on the entry on the west, they're using that same accent material. And then this is looking at the north elevation. The car wash is in this location here. And these will be basically precast panels, which are acceptable per the ordinance, and they do break them up. You can't have over 100 feet, lineal feet of panels that are all the same without something interrupting that or making it look a little bit better. So they have provided that through the windows and doors. In terms of the first floor, this is the existing building, the demolition, primarily in the front part of the building. And then this is the overall first floor plan, basically showing the new car wash, detail center, areas for servicing vehicles, a lot more bays that they will be able to have. And then primarily in the front, these are the areas where they'll be meeting with customers, And they do have lounges available for them, and then areas where they will have vehicles actually inside that folks can look at. This really shows the two mezzanines, mostly for like storage area and some area for offices. In terms of trash for the site, it will be handled inside the principal building, so there's not a trash enclosure on this. And with the lighting, exterior lighting, pretty much everything will remain the same. There will be some additional wall pack lights on the new addition, and the areas in orange just indicate some of the additional pole lighting. All of this does conform with the ordinance. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the PUD and also the preliminary and final plat, subject to the 17 conditions identified. One is that the previous approvals that you've seen in the report, which there are many, that those will remain, they will remain applicable except as modified by the application. We talked about the vehicle storage, that actually expires with the redevelopment of Lot 1. Staff has no issues with having that use on Lot 2, provided they pave and meet the ordinance with regard to that material. Item number 3 is an ordinance standard for all car sales lots. No auctions be permitted. They are requesting for the opportunity to have overnight construction, and they are permitted to do that working with our city engineer, but they don't know if that's needed or not, but just would like to have it. So we're including that with the PUD. We're also requesting the documentation from the adjacent neighbor to allow work on their property, the vehicle storage to allow it on Lot 2, the woodland replacement to allow that to come in at the time of development of Lot 2. We're also requesting that the applicant file some type of covenant over Lot 2, just indicating that what the green space standards and what the woodland replacement needs to be, so that anyone looking would know. We'll have that information in the future. Landscape plan, staff is recommending approval just with the addition of 12 ornamental trees. Looking for on the building itself, when we're dealing with rooftop equipment and screening on the new part of the building, they are putting in screening walls. On the old part of the building, that equipment can just be painted. So we just want to make sure that wherever the views are, that HVAC equipment, et cetera, on the top of the building is not directly viewable from the adjacent streets. And I believe that's the case, but we just were a little bit short on the perspectives for taking a look at that. Let's see. 11 is a standard condition about exterior mechanical equipment being painted to be similar to the building. Sign permits need to be obtained, and that the future signs would need to conform to the construction standards of the sign ordinance. Light fixtures shall be downcast and shielded. City engineer comments, we included their review memo with the staff report. So there are some outstanding, they're minor conditions, but things that just need to be cleaned up. So we've included that. Also that the city engineers still wanted to have the condition for the 15-foot trail easement to be included in the conditions, but it is being shown on the plat, so that's taken care of. And then also that the applicant is responsible for obtaining any permits that they need from the Lower Minnesota Watershed District, MnDOT, and other affected jurisdictions. With that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Garros. That was a lot of information. And looks like a great project coming up. I'm really excited for Park-Jeep. Any questions, commissioners? Commissioner Timmerman. Oh, Commissioner Wallace, excuse me.
Thank you. And I have a couple questions for staff in regards to the maps that we looked at, in particular the grading maps. So the true separation is going to be between Lot 1 and Lot 2 is the existing retaining wall that's already in place at Park-Jeep?
Yes, there is an existing retaining wall, but I believe that there may be some additional grading at some point in the future as well. But they did install the retaining wall as part of their phased development.
And so that is the true separation now between lot one and
Yes.
two? Okay, I just wanted to
Yes.
have that understanding.
Yes.
And I know you said that there's going to be some additional, retaining wall then put into place on that northwest corner. So that'll just be basically additional to what's already existing.
Yes.
Okay. And then it looks like we have parking spots going right up to that current retaining wall?
Yes. They are proposing a split rail fence along the retaining wall. And for vehicle storage, these are not areas that are going to be accessed by the public, the general public. This is going to be just for their staff to park vehicles in that location, in those locations.
Okay, because, yeah, then my only other suggestion would be if staff looked at the possibility of potentially having additional landscaping put in next to that retaining wall since it is so tall and steep.
The issue with that is that, especially with retaining walls, we want to be really careful with the landscape material so it doesn't, you don't have a situation with the roots, affecting the wall. And that's a taller wall in that location. If there is room to add some of those trees that we had indicated in that area, they can, but there's really not much room. I believe there's a 10-foot setback is about all there is, and then it's fairly sloped.
Okay. That answers my questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Watt?
Yeah, thank you for a great presentation again. Condition number 2 is that the interim use permit to allow vehicles to be stored on unpaved areas of the site expires August 5th, 2024. Is that the interim use permit that we approved a couple years ago?
Yes, that is the 2019 interim use permit, and actually is read that it expires on August 5th, 2024. It was for 5 years, or until the property is developed or redeveloped.
Oh, and this constitutes redevelopment.
Right.
Okay, well, that kind of answers my question about condition number 6, but I'll get into that later. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? And a question that I have, so it looks like all the redevelopment has taken place on one of the 2 lots, basically, correct?
That's correct on lot 1.
Okay, but the lot line is before the hill, is that correct? The breaking of the lots?
Grading plan. This would be the construction limits. And this is actually, the property line is, I believe, I don't know if that's a property line or the setback. Mr. Leckie, do you recall where that is in relation to that?
Do you have the plat?
Would be the preliminary plat. That may be something we need the applicant to address for the commissioners.
I believe if you go back to the grading plan, that north line is the new lot line. Right there.
Okay. In terms of unpaved parking, that is on lot 1 or lot 2?
It's kind of in between both, when you look back at the. Yep. So we just wanted to make sure that we don't have it, I guess what we wanted to do, in terms of the conditions being the way that they are, is to allow for vehicle storage to take place on this property as long as it meets the ordinance.
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure where exactly the property line comes in here. I think some of this is on 2.
It has been a long time we've been asking for the pavement there. How many years was that?
Boy, I think the economic development, part of it goes back to at least 2013 and maybe even sometime before.
Okay, so yeah. I do remember this from those days, that's why I asked. I was curious, at any rate. Any other questions from the commission? Well, the applicants are here. Would you like to speak to us? Love it.
I could probably clarify the property line.
Sure, if you want to step up, please. And we have a procedure,
What
name,
grading?
address for the record.
Grading plan?
So I'm Kyle Crawford, I'm the project civil engineer. I work for Emmons and Oliver Resources out of St. Paul.
Okay, thank you.
So for the property line, it is that north line. And if you actually go back to the aerial, the property line is just north of that gravel parking zone. So yeah, lot 1, as shown on that aerial, does include all of the inventory shown within
Okay.
the gravel there.
Okay.
It looks like, Mr. Crawford, that you are looking to extend, or the Park Jeep is looking to extend the variance, is that a correct word for it? Until 2024. What's the reasoning behind that? Do you know?
So that would take into account development of the northern lot. So at this point, we are only looking at proposing to build out lot 1. The owners are looking to develop lot 2 as well, but that would be a future development.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Mr. Crawford before I open up to the public hearing? Commissioner Timmerman.
I have a couple questions. Thank you, Mr. Crawford, for having the courage to come before us today. This is a great project. I think that you've put a lot of work into this, and Deb, thank you so much for the presentation. It was a long presentation, so my questions are kind of scattered throughout the different information. But first and foremost, I guess I'm looking for the timeline of the demolition and the construction, and then just maybe a narrative on what business will look like during that construction phase.
Sure, and I might defer to a few others here as well. And actually, we do have the project architect online, and he would probably be best to answer the project timeline question.
Okay.
Brandon?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here, Brandon Grease Architectural. You guys can hear me?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. So in regards to project timeline, we're really, this package is out to bids to contractors. I mean, ideally, depending on project budgets, we would undergo starting construction this fall yet and finishing, sometime later next year. It's obviously going to be disruptive, a project, so there is some project phasing that's going to have to take place that we'll coordinate with the contractor. However, if you really look at it, I mean, it's really the service drive that's going to be, one that's we're going to really have to replace. The existing showroom, the existing service department, yes, there's work in there, but it's minimal. So I would see them kind of getting the new done and then coming back and taking out the existing service so we have replacement base within the new. But
Okay, great, thank you. That actually, as I look over my other questions, they had been answered previously, so that's all I have for you, Mr. Crawford. Thank you.
One other question I have, the area itself, there's no residential apartment buildings. I'm trying to think on my own, any kind of disruption that we would be looking at from overnight construction, things of that nature.
No, the closest residential would be south of the freeway, or excuse me, of Highway 13. And I think further to the east. I think.
Quite a ways.
Yeah.
There's no, it's a ways away from any.
So-
Which is, yeah,
Technical term, right?
should not be, yes, correct.
Well, that's great, thank you. Any other questions from the commission? With that, I am gonna open up the public hearing. It is 7:44, and the public is free to speak on this issue. It doesn't look like we have many more people on the Zoom call or anyone on the phone. Check that. He says no.
You want me to speak, so.
You know.
You came all the way here.
You came here. It's hot outside.
Okay. It's been kind of a quiet night, too.
Yeah, right. I'm just looking for voices, right?
I'm Jonathan Dworsky. I'm one of the co-partners with the 5337 Properties. Just to give you some historical background, the 5337, as you know, the zip code in Burnsville is what?
55337.
And what 5337 spells, just in case you're wondering when you dial it? Jeep. So it isn't a coincidence that Park Jeeps in its history has been truly a member of this community going back to the late 60s. So we're really proud to be here. And we're really excited about what we're going to be doing for the next, hopefully the next generation in our business. And hopefully we can be a great member, a continued member of the community. You mentioned a question regarding timing, and certainly that's a big issue for us as well. That's why we were looking forward to some flexibility with the 24-hour rule. We're certainly not going to be doing any pilings at night or anything like that, but we want to try to get the job done as quickly as possible to mitigate the exposure to our business interruption. So, but with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dvorsky. I am really excited about this. Like you say, it's right off of Highway 13. It's one of our gateway areas, and I think this is going to be a beautiful building. The sign is recognizable, I think, to everybody that goes down Highway 13 that way. And you are a great partner for Burnsville, and really appreciate your staying with us and being a part of our family, basically. Any other questions for the applicant?
The timing is going to be, a lot of it's going to be predicated on material, and then the economic factor would be the material costs. So that's our variable right now.
As is for everybody, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming. Not seeing anybody else online or on the phone or in person, I will close the public hearing at 7:47. I'm going to turn it over to our commission for any discussions we have on this issue before us. Commission. Commissioner Timmerman.
I would just reiterate what we've already talked about, that it's a great facelift for this property. I think that, as you said, Chair, this is a very visible property in Burnsville, and I think that the design has been well thought out. I think that staff has hit all of the variances or deviations, rather, that need to be addressed, and I support this fully.
Any other commissioners? Motion, maybe.
I'll follow that up with a motion.
Commissioner Timmerman.
Ms. Garros, if you would, put it back on. Thank you. So I would like to move that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the development stage PUD for an expansion of Park-Chrysler-Jeep Dealership building and site improvements, preliminary and final plat of a two-lot commercial subdivision in Industrial Park 5337, located at 1408 Highway 13 West, subject to the following 17, are all of them on here?
Yes.
17 conditions.
Okay, a motion's been made by Commissioner Timmerman. Do I have a second? Why, Commissioner Anderson?
I'd like to second this as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Motion by Commissioner Timmerman, seconded by Commissioner Anderson. All in favor, please do so, say so by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? It is unanimous. And both of these will show up on, both of these planned unit commission, yes, CUPs will be on the city council meeting on Tuesday, September 7th at 5:30 PM. And it'll be
Yes.
on the consent agenda.
That's correct.
Thank you, everybody, for your help, and thank you, Ms. Garros, for a great presentation once again. With that, I think that is the end of the agenda. So, I don't know if anybody has anything to say now? Oh, updates, yes, I'm sorry.
That's fine. So our next planning commission meeting is September 13th. So we're gonna have, it looks like right now, 2 public hearings and 1 discussion item. So we're back to our full meetings. So that is the only update I have. Deb, do you have anything to add?
To say that we're probably not gonna be able to continue with hybrid meetings.
I wish our city attorney was still here. So
Sure.
we'll need to take a look at the public hearing, I'm sorry, the quorum requirements and in-person versus hybrid, and if those hybrid meetings can continue, or if you all need to be present due to open meeting law. So we'll have that formal decision for you. Like I said, I wish our city attorney was here to fall back on because he would know. But we'll keep you posted. Until then, I'd suggest plan on being in person.
Okay.
I believe that's the case, that we can still have these meetings for the public, but I think that all of the commissioners and council members can't be hybrid anymore, I think.
There are some special considerations
Yes.
that we can provide of when the cases are allowed that you could, but now that we're back to the outside of the executive order, those extra conditions we were given don't apply at this time anymore.
Okay. Well, we're all here, so I think it'll be okay for all of us, hopefully. Any updates, commission? And with that, I will stand for a motion to adjourn. Commissioner Awad, you have something to say?
I move that we adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Awad. Why, Commissioner Anderson?
I think I can second this one as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Anderson. With that, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Again, unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight, and have a great night.